Hello, hello. I am standing on a table, and today we're going to talk about the situation in Ukraine, in and around Ukraine. There are various items I would like to address. There's some things I found online, some YouTube channels and some news channels reporting about the situation there, current events. And I want to go into some detail and then give a somewhat historical outlook and what I'm thinking about, what's actually happening at the moment. So the first bit I have here is from a Ukrainian diplomat. So this is an official person, a spokesperson, being interviewed by Deutsche Welle, which is a German public broadcast service. They have their own YouTube channel, and he was being interviewed about Finland and Sweden joining NATO and about his view on the German government and what they're doing. And let's see what he has to say. It's just a short snippet.
Oh yes, sure. Because first of all, for some reason, Germany feel guilty about Jews being killed during the Second World War.
Did you get that? He said, for some reason, as if he didn't know why. So yeah, I mean, maybe there was something. I have a vague recollection of something happening there during the World War. Maybe. Let's see what he's saying next.
And Russians, rather than Belarusians and Ukrainians, who actually the bigger number than Russians were killed by the Nazi during the Second World War, and the whole war was on our territory, not on Russian territory.
So this is just factually wrong. This is plain wrong. If you look up the numbers, I mean, obviously, during the Second World War, we had the Soviet Union, and this included Belarus and Ukraine and Russia. And if you divide the numbers, the Soviet Union lost about 27 million people in the Second World War, the largest total number. And if you split it up by ethnicities, like he's trying to sell us, that the Ukrainians were suffering more casualties, that's not correct. It was about 14 million, close to 14 million Russians that died, close to 7 million Ukrainians, and about 2 million Belarusians. So even if you, for some reason, want to split it up like this, it's the Russians coming up with the biggest number of losses. And if you look at it in a percentage, like percentage of the population, then Ukraine is slightly ahead with 16%, roughly 16% of the population, compared to Russia with about 13%. And Belarus, that's actually correct, they had 25%, so as a percentage. But I'm not sure where this is leading, where this is going. So they all suffered horrifically. They were all in the same army, in the Red Army. And yeah, like just a starting point about not knowing why the Germans feel guilty about the Jews, that's neo-Nazi talk, really. I don't understand why this person is allowed to spread this kind of misinformation and historic revisionism the German news agency here. Yeah, like it's not really interesting, the rest what he's saying. He is on a very right-wing journey here, and I don't think there's any validity to it. So I'm just going to jump to the next topic here. This is a channel that you ran. It's interesting. It is definitely on a pro-Russian side, but it's interesting to get a different perspective. It's the two guys you can see on the top half, Alex and Alexander. Usually, it's quite interesting. It's tinted, but it's interesting to see. But they're interviewing here an American guy called Gonzalo Lira. I think his parents were from Chile. I read something about him. Apparently, allegedly, he's a Pinochet fan, which I don't think is cool at all. But I thought I give it a chance and I listened to it. There was a story about him. He is currently in Ukraine, and apparently he had been arrested by the police because of his activities, broadcasting pro-Russian propaganda and stuff like that. And he was interrogated and released after a couple of days. So I thought I look into the situation there. And well, at the end of the interview, he comes pretty clean about his opinion and his political views. So let's listen to what he has to say here about Finland and Sweden.
And the Swedes, they don't matter anymore. They are a broken people who are being invaded by Middle Easterners and Africans, and they're being annihilated in their own country. They mean nothing, quite frankly. They're pathetic. The Swedish Empire died in Poltava in the 17th century.
Again, I don't know what to say to that. So he's obviously talking about immigrants, and he's referring to the immigration into Sweden as an invasion. So he's saying they're being invaded by these people, and that means that they're at the end, that this is a broken country and it's destroyed. Before that, I'm not going to play more of this because it's pointless. He's just going to fantasize about Russia annihilating Finland and Sweden in like one day or something, or minutes. I don't even know, like just insane theories about the inability of the military to defend the country at all. I mean, I'm not a military expert myself. I don't know how well the Finnish army could stop a massive scale Russian invasion. But again, what he's saying makes no sense at all. I'm not sure. But what I am sure about is that it's not worth listening to him. So from now on, I will simply ignore him. I'm not sure if he has mental issues or is there some political agenda that somebody's paying him for. I have no idea. But yeah, if I come across that guy again, like he has been interviewed a lot recently. He seems to be connected to some other people on YouTube and other channels. But no, that's just insane. Yeah, so much for that. So I'll switch to another one. Again, this is also somewhat right-wing channel, but this is definitely an anti-Russian channel. Speak the Truth. They bring daily reports about the situation at the front. Again, it's kind of interesting to see, but it's very strongly colored. And what they keep saying though, and like repeatedly, pretty much every episode, they insist on being neutral. So I just want to debunk that. They're definitely not neutral. I mean, go and watch them if you're interested. These guys are ex-military, so they probably know what they're talking about. But just on the matter of being neutral, this is 1 or 2 days after the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Let's see what they have to say about their opinion about the two sides.
Videos. They are dropping like flies over there. They are dropping like flies. So that's good. At least they're dying. If one good thing comes out of this conflict, dead Russians.
Good. I actually don't go against that. I think the rest of the world is probably on the same page with that.
So much for neutrality. The guy said the only good thing about the war is dead Russians. And his friend agrees that's not neutral. There's nothing more to say about this, There's just nothing more. If you want to have a balanced picture about what's happening, it could be interesting, like I said, to see what they have to say, see the propaganda from both sides might give you somewhat a realistic view about things, but just keep in mind, this is not neutral. This is on a anti-Biden American platform, so to just be aware of that. Next up is a different story, completely different. I think this is actually pretty close to neutral as far as you can get. This is the official channel of the Austrian Army. If you guys know, Austria is not part of NATO. They are obviously a Central European country, and their alignment is clear, but like I said, they're not NATO. They have been analyzing situations and battles and stuff in the Ukraine on a, I think, irregular basis, or maybe once a week, but not very frequently. Very interesting. This is the official page, the official YouTube channel of the army. And in this episode, they've been talking about military factors. They've been comparing a battle in the Second World War between the the German army and the Red Army, and they're comparing the battle with current battles, and the danger of parts of the armies being encircled and all that. And there's a small bit that really caught my attention. Let me play this and see if you can also get that bit.
Der erste Faktor ist, dass offensichtlich die ukrainische Seite sehr genau Bescheid weiß über die Art und Weise der russischen Angriffe. Der zweite Faktor ist,
so he's comparing the factors of the Second World War battle and the parallels to the ongoing battle right now in the Donbass region. And you can see the map there is very clear. And yeah, just read the subtitles.
dass die ukrainische Seite sich sogar jahrelang vorbereitet hat und tief gestaffelte Verteidigungsstellungen eingerichtet hat.
Do you see that? Has set up defense positions in the depth in anticipation of a Russian attack. So at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of debate. Some people are still talking about the reasons of the war, and the standard idea was the idea was that the war came out of nowhere. The Russians were just assembling troops and suddenly they attacked. That's not the truth. I mean, I'm not trying to condone or approve of the war, not at all. I'm just trying to explain the situation, and the situation is a fact, right? We know what happened and what didn't happen. So there was a war in Ukraine, an ongoing civil war for roughly 8 years before the Russians entered that war. And the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian army knew that this was going to happen sooner or later. It was probably, from their point of view, inevitable. So they kept going anyway. They kept poking, and they're just prepared. So like this, I think it's probably a general, this Austrian military man is explaining, they currently have various defense positions deeply entrenched because they're preparing this for years. And I'm pretty sure we can take his word for it. They have their own intel, and they have no motivation to lie. And Austria, the Austrian army is not suspicious and might be, spreading Russian propaganda. So I'm pretty sure we can take this at face value.
In Erwartung des russischen Angriffes. Und der dritte Faktor, unbestritten seit Beginn der Angriffe auf die Ukraine, die Verbissenheit der ukrainischen Soldaten, die quasi jeden Meter Boden verteidigen, mit der Absicht, die russische Seite so abzunützen, dass dieser Angriff schlussendlich scheitert und nicht den Erfolg bringt, den sich die russische Seite erwartet.
So again, some things that people are talking about in the various news outlets and the media, social media as well, we can confirm some of this. The NATO states are providing enough information to the Ukrainian army to know exactly about every movement of the Russian army, so that they can anticipate and stop the movement of the Russian army, and they're trying to stop the encirclement. It might still happen, like I said before. I'm not a military expert. I'm not in Ukraine. I can't tell you what's actually happening right there at the front, but we can clearly see what the Russian army is trying, and so far they haven't succeeded. And the way they're able to act points, like the Austrian military man says, to the amount of information they're getting about Russian troop movements.
Zum Schluss möchte ich Ihnen diese Videosequenz und dieses Standbild aus dieser Sequenz zeigen. Sie erkennen hier die Situation der ukrainischen Soldaten im Donbass. Wir sehen eine Schützengrabenlinie, die sich quasi von Nord bis Süd zieht. Wir erkennen Krater von den Einschlägen der russischen Artillerie in den letzten Tagen, beziehungsweise sehen wir hier auch gerade den Einschlag einer russischen Artilleriegranate. Die ukrainischen Soldaten, die wir hier erkennen können, versuchen quasi diesen Einschlägen auszuweichen, indem sie in den Schützengräben Schutz suchen. Dieses Bild soll Ihnen zeigen, dass wir eine Situation haben, die sehr an den Ersten Weltkrieg erinnert, Verdun 1916, also einen Stellungskrieg, wo beide Seiten versucht haben, durch den massiven Einsatz von Artillerie sich abzunützen.
And this brings me to the next topic I wanted to talk about. More and more I see these comparisons coming up, comparing the situation in Ukraine, especially in the Donbass area, with the First World War. I think this is fascinating. I like comparisons. Comparing something doesn't mean that you're saying it's the same. You can compare things even to try to point out how absolutely different they are. But it has a certain quality and it can give you some information. Obviously, there are big differences as well. But let's play with this idea of the comparison between the current war and the First World War. There is definitely a trench warfare happening, and the Russian side is trying to break the stalemate with a lot of artillery. So there's a very strong comparison. This is very similar to the situation in the First World War. The question is, how did we get there? And during the First World War, the situation was that the military command did not have a clear idea what war would look like with all the new technology. Tanks hadn't been invented yet, and the idea of just shelling the opposite side and then slowly walking across the battlefield and take over the destroyed positions, that didn't work out. And millions of people died as a consequence of this. So the current situation now seems to be somewhat similar to this, even though now the Russian side, like both sides, obviously have tanks and armored transports and helicopters and whatever. So they should be able to have a much faster way of approaching the opponents, but not sure why. Maybe it's a mixture of reasons why they can't actually do this. It's definitely about the amount of support that the Ukrainians are getting, a lot of modern weapon systems, RPGs and more modern anti-tank weapons are playing their part. But the casualties are going down on the Russian side. They're not doing this fast mobile war that they tried at the first few weeks. Yeah, it's definitely changing, and now it looks in this part like the First World War. Are there maybe some more parallels that we could look at? So currently, NATO members are providing a lot of material and money for the Ukraine government. NATO just delivered American artillery, so the American government approved, I think it was $40 billion as a war loan. The European Union has just approved some more, and lots of weapons have already been delivered. They have this is all adding up, and it's not gifted. If the United States of America are pumping many billions of dollars into Ukraine, they want this money back at some point. So the only way to get the money back is after a successful campaign. Should Russia win the war, take over large parts or maybe even all of Ukraine, then the United States won't get any money back. If there's a puppet government after a successful war on the Russian side, a puppet government in Ukraine will not repay these war loans. Not at all. And at some point, this will mean that the United States can't back out of the war. They won't be able to do this at all. It will just be too much money they would lose on this. So they've been trying to get this war going for a long time, all the time after affecting the regime change in Kiev. They have been training the troops there. They have been providing weapons. They have been instructing the military. They've been preparing for this war for a long time. This is a proxy war, and it's deliberate. So how will we get out of this situation? The more money the USA and the other NATO members are pumping in, the more money is being loaned to the Ukrainian government, the less likely it is that they will back out. The less likely it is that they will be willing to see a compromise. I heard the phrase, somebody said that the United States are willing to defend Ukraine to the last Ukrainian. And that's pretty much it. They don't really care about the casualties, obviously. So they're not interested in a peace unless it's after a victorious battle. when the Crimea and the Donbas region have all been back under Ukrainian control. And there's a reason for that. It's not just militarily, this obviously plays a big role, but also most of the resources are actually placed or located in the Donbas area. So if you want to extract wealth out of the area after the war, that's the areas you really want to control. That's probably the main reason why the Russians want to control these areas as well. But if we know that NATO, especially the US, can't back out of the war, what about Russia? What would be acceptable for their side? So after all the casualties they've taken, their declared intention to not let NATO expand any further, about their declared war aims, what could they back down from? Not much, really. They probably wanted to destroy Ukraine completely, as in get rid of the Ukrainian government, have a land bridge available that connects to the Crimea area. But apart from that, they kind of have to go all the way now. And even if for some reason they would try to declare a successful campaign now, as you know, they are officially not calling it a war, it's a special military operation. If they decide to call this a win and they stop attacking, they just defend and try to rebuild the areas that have been destroyed, if you want a peace, both sides have to agree on it. They can't do it unilaterally. Ukraine army could still, maybe after a brief phase of rearming and recruiting more soldiers, they could attack again, and they would attack again. So for a peace solution, both sides would have to be agreeing on something, and I can't see that happening. The only thing I can see happening is a stalemate that is going on for years, increasing the number of casualties and bleeding the conflict dry. That is probably going to happen, because everything else would mean an escalation. Should Russia make massive gains, like the guy here in the video was discussing, it could happen that they have a kettle where they seal off large parts of the Ukrainian army, many of them being veterans, so it's an important part of the army. They could seal off an area with like 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers in it. Should that happen, that would be very problematic for the ongoing war, for the Ukrainian side. If anything like this happens, NATO would be forced to act. I'm not sure what they would do. There are lots of options. They could escalate and annex some of the areas. They could send in more material. They could send in troops from a neutral other country. If you have enough money, you can buy a certain amount of mercenaries. So there are options, but it would escalate. And then the Russian side would have to react to that. And if we turn it around, if the Russian government still is not willing to declare war and use conscripts, and at some point they lose so many troops that the Ukrainian offensives pushing them back and maybe even enter Russia and go across the border, then they would have to act. They'd be forced to escalate on their side. And they still have means to escalate. This is not an all-out war. Thankfully, it's not. And even if we, for a moment, neglect the possibility of a nuclear strike, they could bomb the cities. They haven't done that yet, but they are capable of doing this. If you look at the history, if you look at the Chechnya war, they destroyed cities, leveled them completely. So nothing is really keeping them from doing that with cities like Kiev. They could have a massive bombing campaign and just destroy everything. So yeah, I'm really pessimistic about this. I don't see at which point we could have a peace that both sides could live with. I don't think it's impossible, but I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon. Maybe there's some lessons there that we can learn about history and comparing things like First and Second World War. Some food for thought there. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be back with a new report maybe tomorrow or the day after.